Hello again, and welcome to One Starfish. I'm really excited for my guest. Anne is from California. She's been in leadership coaching for 30 years. We were just talking about that, and it's really cool. She's a really good friend of mine. We met in Arte, and we chat quite a bit. She's picked me up. We spent time in California. She's absolutely incredible. I'm really excited to be hanging with her today. So Anne, tell us a little bit about 30 years. It's a long time. But if you think back, what got you into leadership coaching, HR development, that kind of stuff, and what's kept you in it this long?
Oh my gosh, I know it is a really long time. So I'm so excited. Thanks for having me on. And I'm excited to tell you about this because it's a wild story, which I won't necessarily bore you with all the details, but my first entry sort of into human resources, it was my second job out of college. They were just looking for somebody who was a college graduate and enthusiastic, and I got the job. And what really set my foundation, which is different than a lot of people in human resources, is I was a human resources manager immediately, which is a little different. And then they also taught me how to facilitate workshops and how to do coaching, which it wasn't called coaching back then, but it was basically performance management or things like that. And I didn't realize how valuable that was going to be long-term, but it was so valuable to know that, to have that extra skill. So I'm going along in my career and I'm having great opportunities. I had great leaders along the way. And then I got to this company where we had 600 employees, and it was a privately held company. It was family owned. And they said, we have a lot of trouble with unhappy employees here. And one of the jobs we want you to have is helping sort of manage that. And I'm like, okay. So this is the picture I have to draw for you. So there's a reception area. There's my office, which is right off of the reception area, just a regular door. Then there's two locked doors. And everybody else in the management administrative offices are behind the locked doors. So whenever the employees would get disgruntled, and it would often be over something like paychecks not being right, or just something happened. Just something. The receptionist had this panic button, and she would push the panic button, and everybody would come. I always call them it's just, oh gosh, here comes the force. Everybody would come out, all the managers would come out, and they're mostly male in this place, all come out and be like, what's going on out here? It was this weird, immediate, escalated conflict. And me, not behind any locked doors, I'm like, well, this is really, if we're that afraid of what's going to happen, this is not going to work for me long-term. So I'm like, I got to figure something out. So I quickly figured out how to de-escalate those situations. And that was really my first realization that if you treat people just like people, right? So, okay, let me talk to you about your paycheck. That wasn't even my responsibility, by the way. I wasn't payroll, but let me talk to you about your paycheck. Let's sit down, right? Instead of me standing over you or you standing over me or whatever, let's sit down. Talk to me about what's going on, and then trying to find the answers and then get the answers to them. And it really showed me so much about the way they had sort of built this relationship sort of against the employees, and that it didn't need to be that way. And what was so exciting for me is that my CEO, who I reported to, started to see the impact that I was having, and then quickly realized that I was onto something. Okay, so the way we've been doing this maybe isn't the best way. It was so, I can't tell you when I had that job.
I have this visual, it's kind of crazy.
And you can't hear the panic alarm, right? It's something that rings only in the back.
Oh,
it
funny.
was just so, and I'm sitting out there off the lobby thinking, what is going on? It's not like the employee had threatened the receptionist or anything. It was just they would raise their voice. They would say things. Sometimes it was well, I've called several times. No one's calling me back. It was just common.
Frustrated.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just common disrespect that they were feeling. And then they felt like they were frustrated. And especially when most of these people, who am I to judge? I think a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, which is a whole other conversation we could have with you about. Right. But a lot of these people were, barely making it. So when their paycheck was wrong, even by an hour, it was a big deal. I'm going to side note for a second, but I remember one time I said something to the payroll person about, hey, they're missing an hour of pay. And she said, at that time, I'm going to tell you how old I am, but that time it was I don't know, maybe they were making $8 an hour. She's like, it's only $8 an hour. Why can't they wait till the next pay period? I'm like, $8 an hour is a lot of money to these people who are not making that much money. That could be
That's your
food,
meals.
that could be really important to them. So we can't minimize just because you make more than $8 an hour. We can't minimize what that means to them. So we need to get them a check now. So that was kind of my first like realization, like, wow, we got to start treating employees differently to get the most out of them. Then I went from there to a similar size company. So we had 600 employees, but it was a big Fortune 500 company. And I was in one of the leading divisions. I had a huge team of HR professionals. I'm the director of human resources and leadership development. And that was like, again, that was sort of added on to my moment. So I'm already learning like, wow, it's really important the way you treat people. And then I go to this company where they're already onto it, right? Like they're onto this times 1,000. And I'm watching this CEO who is so incredibly successful. Because I feel like back at that time, it was almost perceived like if you cared about what employees thought or you asked for their opinion, it meant that you weren't a go-getter, you weren't going to be successful. And he blended those so well. Like the division was so financially successful, but we would be having some tough conversations. We went through a couple mergers and things like that. And there were always people who potentially were not going to make it as we transferred employee teams. And I still remember to this day, him saying things like there was this really popular employee. I still remember his name. His name was Stanley. And I remember that his position was one of those ones that, they just had created and nobody really knew what the job was, but everybody really liked him. And it was like, well, Stanley, what's going to happen with Stanley? And I remember the CEO saying, that would be huge if we let go of Stanley. Like that is going to affect a lot of people, not because of what the work he does, but because of how popular he is. Yeah. And well liked. And that's going to not be perceived favorably. So we really need to think this through. And if we do have to eliminate his position, he wasn't afraid to make the tough moves, but we have to take some time to back up for a minute and think, how is it going to affect morale? How are we going to manage that? Which people do we kind of need to get on board with it? And it was such a good learning experience for me to see, wow, there are ways to have both. You can be super successful and you can really take care of your people. And my CEO there was amazing at that. And I just learned, I would say between those two experiences, I learned so much that by the time I get to my own business, right, which I started 21 years ago, I first really focused on human resources compliance because that was an easy way to start my business. And I, as quickly as I could, probably 5 years in, added on this leadership development piece, which is where I really work with leaders, either one-on-one or in groups, to become the best leaders they can be. Because employees, you want everybody to want to come to work. I don't know why, people will say things like, well, no one likes coming to work. Really? Well, does it have to be that way? Why can't we make it that everybody likes coming to work, that everybody enjoys being a part of the team? And why can't we build that kind of culture? So I spend a lot of time now doing that and really helping leaders with having not only tough conversations, but like setting expectations, establishing values, and then really implementing those throughout their work teams.
Yeah, that's so good. And if you're listening to this and you have a business, definitely talk to Anne. And it's cute if you're not watching on YouTube, her hashtag is Hey Anne. So, check that out. Her stuff on Instagram is absolutely incredible too. She provides a lot of free value on there also. So make sure to follow her. All that links will be in the show notes, of course. But, as you go through that, what do you see as the number one, is it kind of just lack of understanding and lack of listening? Or what do you see as the number one problem in the workplaces today, as far as where people don't want to come to work and they're not being listened to?
Yeah. I think I would say one of the big issues is that a lot of people in leadership roles have gotten promoted for being really good in their job, right? So somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to promote you. And you're like, yay. And it's more money and you get a title. Now you have a team. And perhaps you've been watching a leader who you didn't think was that great, or you're thinking, gosh, I can do it better than that person. Or you're just excited about this opportunity, but there's not a lot of time spent on training you on what it takes to manage those people. Like even what to do in the first 90 days. Like I have a whole plan of what to do in the first 90 days that most people don't even bother to do. So I spend a lot of time helping leaders almost back into that 90 days, even if they've been in their role for 6 years. It sounds so weird, but that's what happens. So, and I think what it boils down to is that employees need to feel valued. what leaders say is, oh, they're not making enough money. And especially I understand, like right now, the time we're in, it's a very competitive market and there is a big push for making money. But at the end of the day, somebody who feels valued will stay somewhere as long as they can make ends meet. Yeah. I mean, if you can't pay your bills, of course, you're going to move on, but they have to feel valued. So I think that is the biggest issue. And I think there, again, like I said, I think there's something about not training people. Like, how do I make them feel valued? And I've even said to leaders, like, just ask, like, how do I make you feel valued here? And they're like, wow, can I just say that? Well, why not?
I love that.
Why not? Why? Let's just go for the most direct approach and let's see what we get. And then we can talk about the next step, right? And the next step. And there's a lot of fear around what they're going to say. I won't be able to do it. What if it's something I already know what they want? I have a lot of leaders tell me they already know what the employee is going to say. And I said, okay, but have you asked them? No, but I already know. Well, you don't know yet. Let's ask them. Let's give them an opportunity. And then if they say what you thought they were going to say, we can cross that bridge when we get to it. But just because you asked doesn't mean you're guaranteeing anything. It means you're getting information. And I guess I was like getting so passionate about this, but one of the things is if they identify something that you can't do, I would rather that leaders know that now, because then you're always going to have a disconnect, right? So if they want $10,000 more and that's the only thing they want, and you're never going to be able to do that, well, you're always going to have a disconnect with this person.
And maybe they're just not the right fit then.
Exactly. They might just not be the right fit. And then what are you going to do for the time they work for you? And then the time, maybe helping them get to their next level. But while they work for you, give 100%. But what can I do to help you get to this next role? It's so funny to think almost like, well, if I don't ask and I pretend I don't know, everything will just work out. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
I know. I get that. Curious actually, because I've thought about this. Have you ever had anyone when they're asking, instead of directly asking, because some people might not also, they might feel scared to say what they want. So have you ever done like a Google Forms or like a Dropbox or something where they can anonymously say what they would like in the company? Have you ever done anything like that, or how has that worked out?
So I'm not a fan of anonymous because I feel like that says a lot about your work culture. If your employees can't talk to you, then you have built some kind of culture or you have some values that have shut that down. And then I end up working with the leader about how do we unravel that, which can be really hard. If the team, it depends on how long they've worked together, but if they don't feel safe being candid with you, you've made that happen. So I'm not a big fan of anonymous because I feel like you can't do anything with anonymous information. If I know Angela would like to have more opportunities to work on more meaningful projects, then I can talk to you specifically about what that means and how can we do that. But if I get anonymous feedback and I don't know who it's from, I can't adequately.
Because it might not be everybody feeling the same way.
Exactly. And a lot of leaders take surveys like that. It's really interesting. They take it mostly in the positive, by the way, but it's like one person says they're happy. Oh, everyone's happy, or everyone wants more money. No, that's why I don't love anonymous surveys. They're not my favorite. I have used them in certain times for certain reasons because we've had to, but I really want leaders to have teams that feel like they can talk to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because maybe it's not everybody that feels the same way. So then, if you don't know who even said it, you don't know if it's maybe your employee that's always disgruntled, that's just disgruntled all the time, and that's his personality, and whatever. And
you got to work with that person. If someone's
that makes a lot of sense
all the time, you need to work with them. What is it you don't seem like you're enjoying working here? You're not enjoying the work. Here's what I'm observing. Tell me from your perspective what's going on, and let's see where it unraveled is what I always like to say. Where did we start to have this disconnect? And is there any way to get that back? And like you said, at the end of the day, some people are not going to be your people. They're just not going to be. And we have to be, as leaders, you need to be able to let those people go, whether it's actually a termination of employment or if they're going to resign, you need to let them go and you need to let them be successful somewhere else because it'll be a better match for them.
Yeah. And we just went through that in our organization with our assistant. And it was actually a really good conversation because I was just like, hey, this is what I'm looking for the next level. I don't think this is you. I was pretty sure it wasn't them, but we had a conversation and then they're like, no, that's not me. I'm like, okay, so I am bringing in someone else. And if you can help train them, that'd be awesome. And they're like, awesome. and we've created a culture, which makes me really happy because I've never had to lay someone off. So I'm like, oh boy, how do I do this and still like stay friends, I guess, or whatever. And she's still sending me referrals, and she's like, yeah, this is cool. Like, cause she gets where I want to go. And I was able to paint the vision. Do you talk to leaders a lot about that? And actually, in curiosity, what is your vision for your company?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I spend a lot of time, vision, but for me, like the most important thing sort of are those values that you gotta create. And this is so funny. When I talk to leaders about that, they will agree, right? We're at a coaching session. Oh yeah. No, I don't have values. I think it's a great idea. Okay, let's start creating them. And then they don't want to commit. Usually first I get a list of like 30 and I'm like, okay, that's lovely, but we got to manage it down to one. No one's going to remember all those, including you. And let's try to streamline it down into manageable. I mean, I try not to limit the number because I know some people like 10, but I do try to keep, maybe just make sure they're memorable, right? If you're like, oh, I remember 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, what's 5? Then we got to rethink that, because then they're really not, they might be things you would like to have as your values, but they're probably not really your values. So I think that's so important. I also think the resistance part is so funny, because that every leader does it. They're so resistant to putting it down and actually saying, okay, not only am I going to like commit to these, but now I got to start talking to my team about them. I got to make sure that they understand what they are, what they aren't. And then also holding them accountable, right? So I'll just say two. So the vision for my company is definitely to help as many leaders as I possibly can build workforces, or teams, I should say, really, that are engaged and excited and motivated. I mean, that's really what I want. I want leaders to build these environments that are things that people think are just dreams, but that can really happen. But it takes work. And I don't think every workplace sets every leader up for success, because usually you have a whole lot of work to do yourself and you have this team, and it feels like you don't have a lot of work on the team to work for the team. But one of the things I always say is, if you tell me as a leader, I don't have the time to work with my team, then I will flat out tell you, you shouldn't be a leader anymore. Because you have to have the time. You just can't. You have to have the time. It might not be all the time you want. I get that, but you've got to make time, like dedicated time to team development, team growth, finding out if they feel valued. So I think that's so, so important. And I'll just share one of two of our core values. One is excellence. And so what that means is excellence in everything you do. So if you're going to give me some information, let's say it's a project, I want you, when it's leaving your inbox, you're like, I did the very best work I possibly could do. Not like, it's all right. We'll see what Anne thinks. No, I did my very best job. Doesn't mean it won't get, some feedback, but it means I feel really good about it. And same with all of our interaction with clients. Like we go above and beyond. Our clients are constantly telling us that too. They're like, oh, wow, you're giving me so much more than I thought. And that's what I'm always shooting for. So it leads through in education. I always want us to remain the most knowledgeable we possibly can, giving the most important information to everybody in a timely way. It just really leading with excellence. And then the other one that's really big to me is just giving back, because it's so important. That we've had great success over 21 years, and I make it a huge priority to give back. And that looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes I mentor HR professionals at no cost. So I'm their coach at no cost to help them become better HR professionals. We donate a lot, and we also give our time to a lot of organizations where I'll take my team, they're getting paid, but because I don't want to make them use their time off. I'm pretty strict about that. I mean, they can if they want to, but I won't make them. But I take the team and we'll go do something. It depends on, we've done a few different things for nonprofits that needed help, distributing products to their employees, their clients, things like that.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And why do you think, you mentioned, and I find this interesting, you mentioned a lot of leaders that you sit with, the core values kind of is like, yeah, that's great, but they have a hard time nailing them down. Why do you think that is?
I know, that's a good question. Okay, so I have two thoughts on it. One is because once you start making them like formalize it, it's like, oh, wow, now I'm really needing to formalize. I can't sort of be as maybe loose or fluid, which it's funny because, as you know, too, when you put in more structure, it actually gives you more freedom.
Yeah.
People think it's the exact opposite. Structure means restriction and I'm not going to grow and I'm not going to be able to do things, but structure gives so much more freedom. It gives your employees so much more freedom because they know what they're working with. Mm-hmm. So I think it's sometimes hard. I also think sometimes it's making them hold themselves accountable. Like, okay, what really are my values? I mean, I if I'm going to say excellence is our value, that means I have to display it, and not only display it, but I also have to admit when I messed up and I didn't do something that was my very best, because my team sees it. And I'm not walking around like, oh yeah, do as I say, not as I do. I'm like, oh, I messed that one up. I didn't go to the point where I should have gone before I, interacted with that client. So.
Yeah. So just the accountability side. Cause yeah, like I said, I find that interesting. I wouldn't have thought that actually. So that's an interesting kind of fact.
I do too. I find it interesting. And it's almost every time it's like it's interesting because you get the agreement to do it. Like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But so much resistance to actually put it down and then define them, right? Because it's one thing to write a list of words, but then actually define so that you can explain that to your team. So not only, and by the way, I say if you have a team, you don't even have to have a team. If you're in any role, you should have a set of values, in my opinion, that because everyone can be a leader, even if they don't lead their team. They can be a leader in their position.
From the bottom up.
Exactly. So you should have your set of core values that you're going to live by and you're going to hold yourself accountable to. And those likely may follow you when you have a team, but you might add some or change them or revise them as time goes on, for sure.
That's really cool. Like I said, growing up with like the Arte thing, that's interesting because like they talked about it. So I wrote them out and, we rewarded in our team. We have rewards for them in our team. That's our culture. But I haven't been in a lot of other cultures. So it's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really hard for people to do. It often will in like a coaching. So if I'm doing sessions of coaching, it can take they'll agree in the one and I'll be like, okay, well, why don't you put something together next week? We'll just look at it. It doesn't even have to be perfect. And the next one, it's like, well, I didn't get to them. Okay, well, why not?
Right.
And then it takes a few sessions to actually get them to write them down. And then it takes more time for them to actually release them
and cut them back.
Yeah.
Get them actually because it is, when I look at them, like I have them here by my computer and it's a good reminder. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I need to do something a little differently because that's not quite the core value.
Yeah. Well, I think something we learned in Arte, which I think is so valuable, is that it can be something you're striving for. Like, I think that's the other thing is people think, well, I haven't reached that yet. And I remember specifically that Andy Frisella said that. He said, it can be something you're striving for. It doesn't have to be where you're at yet, but it's definitely one of your core values. That's what you're going for every single time. And I love that.
That's awesome. And then you mentioned too, like structure equals freedom. I like that.
Yeah.
Touch a little bit on that, what that means.
Yeah. I mean, it's something so that would be something that I've even been working on in my business, but I just think the more structure that you have, it just makes things so much easier. And you really frees your mind up because we carry so much around in our head, if you will, of like, oh, I got to do this and I need to do that. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you start to free that up and actually either schedule it on your calendar for regular time, it just makes it so much easier. And so one of my really good friends said to me once, it was my personal trainer. He's also become a really good friend. And he was trying to get me to add in extra days of working out. And every time he would say it, I would say, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. You're right. Yeah, I should do 30 minutes when I'm not here. And he looked at me one day and he's like, Anne, if you don't put it on your schedule, it's never going to happen because you're really busy. And your best intention is to do it. And I went through this resistance because I was thinking, well, when I look at my schedule, I'm like, oh gosh, where is it fitting in? Yes. And then what I did is I gave myself permission that it didn't have to be tomorrow. But what I did is I looked out 2 weeks and I said, okay, let's look out. So, okay, fine. This week's really busy. Next week's really busy, but let's see, what if I started it 2 weeks from now and I started scheduling it in? So I put it on my calendar, and then that made it, what was so interesting is it took all that every day in my head. Oh, when am I going to work out? I should work out. I should do 30 minutes. So when's that going to happen? Well, I'll do it later. I'll do it here. And just, it takes up so much energy and time that I think when you get that out of your head and you actually get some structure, it's so freeing. because then you're free to have room for other things, whether it be creative thought, or you don't have to worry about that anymore. That's taken care of, right?
And you don't feel guilty and you don't feel bad because you're like, yeah,
exactly. It's like taking up real estate in your brain and your head and all of that. And I just think, yeah, that's not necessary. And then when I think about your team, like if you give them that structure, it gives them the freedom because they don't need to come to you every 5 seconds. They can ask themselves, okay, the core value here is excellence. Is this my very best? Do I feel really good about this? Or I'm kind of like, it's so. Okay, I feel so. Okay, I need to go back then. So it almost starts to free some time up from the leader because it allows them to be able to making decisions and measuring it against what you told them the values are.
That's so good. Making me think of some things I can add.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
To add some structure into the team, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Because structure is like that's why 75 Hard is such a great program, because when I've done it, your day, it just goes because you have no time to think. You're like, do. And you have no time to be like, well, what should I do right now? And then what do you do whenever you have those, like, I don't know what I should do right now. I have 15 minutes to kill. What do? You literally kill it on social media, which does nothing. Unless you're actually working social media, which is my thing. I scroll or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how much time do I waste on that? Whereas when my days are completely structured, and I hate the word busy, I like the word productive.
Yes.
When they're productive, then it's like, wow, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I didn't even scroll. And so, I posted my post, but I didn't scroll and waste time. And I'm like, wow, it was such a productive day. I got so much done. It's amazing.
Just something I did recently, just in that realm, is I shouldn't say, now it's been probably actually almost a year, but I actually schedule my emails now when I do emails every day.
That's so good. Yep.
And everybody tells me, oh no, I can't do that. My business doesn't odd. I can't do it. And I'm like, really? I don't know why. I tell my clients, if it's an emergency, you need to call me, because don't email me on an emergency. And I check my emails twice a day. I check it at 11 a.m. So I start my day. I actually start my day way before my work day, but my official work day, let's say, is 8 o'clock. And I used to come in and start my emails at 8 o'clock, but I realized that would derail my day. So now I don't do emails till 11. That gives time for my clients to get into work, figure out what's on their plate, ask me questions, all of that. And then I check it again at 4. So 11 to 12 and 4 to 5 every day works for me. So I'm checking at the end of the day.
So good.
And like you said, it sort of starts to turn into social media because you're checking it and then the new one comes in and then you bounce up there and then you're down here. And then, you're just all over the place. And before you know it, all you've done is like emails for 2 hours and you haven't even done the work that you were trying to get done that day. So,
and that's and that's something I'm glad I haven't run down, because I've heard the email rabbit trail is terrible. I don't have it on my phone. So unless I'm on my laptop, I can't check it.
Yeah.
Period. So I check it in the morning. And then my assistant checks it during the day. I think sometimes it's something important. I tell her, like, message me, send me a picture, and I'll get on and I'll answer it or do whatever. But like, people know, same with even my texts, like they're on do not disturb, because I'm like, nothing is really that urgent if you're texting or emailing. When you actually think about it, like if someone's in the hospital, they are calling you. They're not texting you. They are not emailing you. Oh my gosh, I'm in a car accident. When you get this, call 911. Like, come on, you're calling. So emergencies are never an email. And so I was like, it's just never there. So some people are like, well, don't you check your emails? I'm like, yeah, once a day.
Yeah, right.
Once a day.
But yeah, I don't know when that's become like this urgency thing. So I've removed that off my plate. And I always am, again, working with leaders to do that. And it's another resistance point.
Because it's a mind shift. I read that, like, so many people, and I'm like, interesting.
Yes.
I'm glad I never ran down that rabbit trail, because
that's so good.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I hate emails. So once a day, I'm like,
it is terrible.
I prepare myself and I'm like, okay, we're going to go in, Yes, and it doesn't even take me that long. I just don't like them. So
right. I like that. That's a great philosophy.
Gotta get in there and get out, but it's never an emergency.
Right. Never.
Because don't email honestly, if someone needs you, whether it's a client, whatever industry you're in, client, your team, whatever, they will call you if it's an absolute emergency.
They will.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
I totally agree.
text, call 911. Like, you don't
Yeah.
text 911. Like, you just don't do that. You call.
It's really interesting. Like, one of the things I'll do sometimes when I'm working with leaders is we'll start to define what an emergency is. And it's really interesting to hear them. And I will say there are a very few leaders I work with that I can understand what they're saying. Like, if someone's website goes down, it's an emergency. But I will, because like I have a client who that's one of the things they do, right?
Yep.
So if a website goes down, that's a big deal. But what I continue to say is, but do we just need to educate them on calling you? Because if they're emailing you that their website went down,
well, they'd be trouble.
That's not a good thing. So it's like a little bit of education. And then it's like, let's define emergency, because I do think we've gotten into that response mode. We respond. If we don't respond, people are going to think we're not paying attention to them and giving them all of the best customer service. And I think there's definitely, I think there's a difference there between being great at customer service and also just being available every second of every single day.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time, like with my team, I'm just always available, and they know that, except for Sundays now. I'm there. If you need me, do call me and I'll see you called me. But if you text me, I'll check it a few times in the day, but like, I'm not on it. Right. So once again, if you need me, call me. I'll see you I'll call you back. I'll know it's an emergency, or whatever your version of emergency is. Like, don't take advantage of this. And they're really good, of course, but like, yeah, same thing.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Because you need to look after your space, I believe, too. As a leader, you need to refill your cup in order to be the best leader you can be. Because leadership is, it's a lot of pouring into other people. It's a lot of giving.
Absolutely. It's something I've been talking about just recently quite a bit, is how important it is for leaders not to let the pressure that they're holding on to get to their team. The team, the leader should be able to be authentic. I don't want them pretending like everything's amazing and we're in a tough time, but they shouldn't.
Fire. It's on fire, but everything's great.
They're like, wait, what's going on? But they should be able to hold the majority of the pressure themselves, so it doesn't filtrate, because it's hard. That's not their job. Their job is not to carry the burden of the leader. No. But to do that goes back to what you said. To be able to be that kind of leader that can hold on to that, you have to be taking care of yourself. Because if you're already like pushing at your maximum and some pressure comes down, it's just so natural to turn around and take it out on everybody around you, right? Like to maybe you're a little short with somebody.
Want? Like, come on.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Can't you see I'm busy? Like, I just have too much going on right now. And when that stuff starts to happen, I'm like, you're not taking enough time for yourself, because you have to be prepared for those moments. And we never know when those moments are going to come to us. When something, you maybe lose a client, or there's a big error, or whatever your job is, you got to be ready for that. But that isn't your team's responsibility to bear that burden. But you have to be in the best condition you can be to take that and still give to your team, like you said.
And the higher you up in leadership, the more responsibility you have.
Very true.
And so you have to be okay with that and realize that's part of the leadership.
It is.
That's just if you want that level of whatever, you need that level of responsibility.
That's a really good way to say it. Like, if you want to keep moving up, or even if you took on the leadership role, even if you're like, well, I didn't know if I wanted it, but I took it. Once you take it, you're committing. Like, and if you don't want that, then you need to step out of it. One of the, when I work with like a lot of small business owners, a common thing that they'll say is that I want my employees to feel like owners. And I always ask, well, are they owners though? Because if you're not giving them a piece of the company, they're not benefiting as part of the profits. You can't expect people to act like owners. So again, they can't carry your burden. If the things are, you're having a tough time in your company that day, that's your responsibility. It's not their responsibility. And unless they truly are owners, I don't expect them to act like owners. I expect them to act like the position I hired them for. I want them to be in that role, excited, feeling valued, feeling good about what they're contributing. I want them to be successful here, but I don't want them to be owners if they don't own part of my company.
Yeah, that's so good, man. Like I said, leadership is my favorite. So I was like,
I know, me too.
Talk for hours. I know this, but I don't want this to go on, because I know you've got a birthday party to get to, which is super exciting. So we will have you back, because, like I said, I love this conversation. But before we wrap up, I have three final questions, and then anything you kind of want to just leave the listeners with.
Okay.
First final question. I can tell you're super passionate about what you're doing. So, a lot of people talk about purpose and all that kind of stuff. So if someone's listening to this and they're looking for their purpose, which if they're listening to this kind of stuff, they're probably looking for that or they have it. But if they're looking for it, what is one sentence you would say to help someone find their purpose?
That's a good question. I think one sentence. That's the part that's hard. Okay.
You can say it.
I think that what I would say is always pursue what makes you feel the best at the end of the day. And I realize that's a little Pollyanna-ish, but it is so true. At the end of the day, I get asked this question about, and hopefully this isn't one of your questions, but they'll be like, oh, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And my friend does this all the time. If you won the lottery, what would you do? And I said, I would do this. And she's like, no. But really, what would you do? And I'm like, no, I would still really do this. Like, I love what I do. And at the end of every day, I do not feel, of course we all feel tired from time to time, but it doesn't drain me. Let's say that it doesn't drain me. And every day I wake up and I'm like excited for another opportunity to hopefully impact another leader. Like every time I speak, podcasts, Zoom events, anything like that. I'm like, if I can just impact one leader every single time I do that, I'm working towards my mission.
I love that. One starfish.
My purpose.
Want to change one?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So cool. Number 2 question. What is your favorite quote? And maybe not your favorite, but the one that comes to mind right now anyway, and why?
Oh my God, that's a good question.
There's so many quotes. Everyone's always like, there's so many quotes, but what's
I know. Okay. I have 2, but so one of them is that I had this leader who, by the way, was not a good leader. And that leader said, you won't know where the line is until you cross it. And it is my favorite. It drives me every single day. It reminds me to push boundaries constantly, to do things that scare me, to do things that, somebody might not like, but just to keep going for it. Cause you don't know where that edge is until you get there, until you're over it. And then you can always step back if you need to, but right. I love that. And then I'll just share the other one that I tell leaders all the time is no news is no news. So many times people say, oh, no news is good news. Leaders say that to me all the time. Oh, that employee's fine. No news is good news. Nope. No news is no news. That's all it's telling you is you don't know anything at this point.
That's a good one. I like that.
Thank you.
Those are really cool. And then last question, what is one word or sentence you would want on your gravestone?
Oh gosh. Impactful.
Ooh, I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just really want to make an impact. It's my goal every single day to make an impact in someone's life. I just feel like if you create a memory for somebody every single day, and hopefully it's a positive one, that's what I'm shooting for. I try to
impact, not negative impact.
Yes, not a negative impact. I want to, everybody I interact with. There's right across the street from my office, there's this great little place where I go get, a coffee some mornings. And I just try to I ask them what their names are. I try to greet them in the morning. I say hello to people that I often call invisible people, security, people are cleaning restrooms, things like that. I just think I want to be remembered for making an impact. And I try to do it every single day through just my basic tasks, as well as through my work with leadership.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. What is there anything that you kind of want to leave the listeners with as a final kind of thought?
I love that. I do. And the one thing I just want to say is, one, you can be a great leader. It does take time. You have to work at it, but I cannot stress enough how important it is that valuing your team piece, and that there's a lot of components there. That's a very kind of overall description of it, but it's so important that your team members know that they are valued, that what value they bring to the team and what they're doing for you. And if at any point you don't think they're adding value, then you have to give them the gift of letting them go give that value to somebody else.
Man, that's so good. Man, like I said, we could go forever. You guys.
I know. I love it. Thank you so much.
Guys that are listening, guys, girls, of course, rate, review, share. This is so good. Follow us on Instagram, tag us on Instagram. And let's go out there and change one life today. One starfish at a time can completely change the world. So thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much, Anne. Have a happy birthday today.
Thank you.
A few days ago, but party. And thank you, all your listeners.
Thank you.